In a world where humanity was on the brink of extinction, an evil god named Vindrake suddenly appeared from the skies, along with his army of various monsters, causing great devastation to the country. The war continued, and the monsters advanced, only to be destroyed in the blink of an eye by magic. Those people are humanity's last hope. The strongest mages of humanity now stand against the evil god Vindrake. Meanwhile, the monsters charge at our heroes. However, our heroes are already preparing their spells to unleash upon them. Then, they fire their long-range magic at those monsters. Setsuna declares that it's all over for the evil god Vindrake as the smoke begins to clear. He prepares a spell combining all 6 magical attributes to release them simultaneously. With that, he casts his elemental explosion spell, while the other heroes get ready to assist Setsuna. Thus, all the heroes use their spells to support Setsuna as much as possible. However, just when everyone thought they had defeated him, Vindrake appeared as the smoke cleared away. Despite having taken the full brunt of the hero's attack, he showed no signs of injury. They couldn't believe he had survived after enduring such an assault. But without giving them time to think, they began preparing another spell, though Setsuna explained they needed to observe him first. The spell was launched against Vindrake once more, but before it could hit, the magic dissipated, leaving Setsuna utterly shocked. Taunting them, Vindrake called them foolish creatures trespassing on his territory. This, of course, left Setsuna's group in shock, and they asked him what they should do. But even Setsuna himself didn't know how to respond to the situation. Before they could think further, one of their companions was struck by something unseen. Trembling, the dark-haired girl said she was running out of mana. Chaos continued around them, and some monsters managed to attack. In an instant, a serpent devoured one of their companions. Setsuna, visibly frustrated, shouted for them to stop while he prepared a spell. Suddenly, Vindrake appeared behind him, and when he turned around, it was too late. He was gravely injured. Clutching his shoulder, Setsuna was horrified to see the entire country in ruins. Setsuna lamented humanity's defeat. Vindrake then proclaimed that the battle was utterly futile against him. But refusing to give up, Setsuna conjured magic into his fist, and struck Vindrake, consequently creating a hole in his arm. This left Setsuna stunned, as he hadn't expected such low-level magic to affect him. After all, that spell was of a lower tier. Then Setsuna finally understood. Perhaps with that magic, he could defeat him, holding on to a glimmer of hope. However, in his current state, he couldn't do much. Vindrake declared that this was the limit of someone like him. Suddenly, his necklace began to resonate with energy. It was the gift Setsuna had received from his headmaster. Going back a little in time, young Setsuna asked why the headmaster had given him the necklace of rebirth. The headmaster explained that the necklace contained the spirit of time, and would allow him to undo his past regrets once. However, the protagonist thought it was unnecessary, considering it a waste to leave it with him. Laughing, the headmaster said that was expected of someone at the top of the magical academy. He explained that one day in the future, Setsuna would certainly need it. Returning to the present, as Setsuna grasped the necklace, he finally realized his regret. He regretted not choosing to use it earlier and now vowed to win definitively. Everything shone brightly, and our protagonist returned to his academy. Still somewhat confused, his friend patted his back, saying it was his turn next. Setsuna was surprised to see Leo. After all, Leo should have disappeared long before the evil god appeared. Then he realized he had truly gone back 10 years in time as he saw the magical academy. Clenching his fists, he once again declared he would defeat the evil god. However, Leo repeated that it was his turn and said they were at the blessing ceremony. With that, Setsuna walked toward the professor. While others chatted among themselves, Setsuna was very popular and also the greatest genius of the academy, possessing affinity with all paths of magic. Then, his professor opened a book, and from it emerged intense magic. There are different paths in magic, and to activate a spell, a different technique is necessary, requiring one to choose a path. This obviously made learning different types of magic highly difficult. Then his teacher calls out to Setsuna, telling him to choose his magical path. He points to long-range magic, saying it would be obvious for him to choose that. In his thoughts, Setsuna says that this would normally be the right path. Elements are made of mana and used against enemies, and long-range attacks are usually enough to defeat opponents. But even if he became the most powerful mage in the world with that magic, it was all useless against that evil god. So he turns around, leaving everyone present surprised by Setsuna. His friend Leo was confused. After all, that morning he had said he would choose long-range magic. However, even so, he chose melee combat magic. His teacher once again warns him that this path focuses on physical strengthening, but despite that, it had been abandoned. If he followed this path, it would basically mean throwing his bright future away. Our Setsuna already knew everything they had told him. However, the only way to defeat Vindrake would be with that path. So, he raises his hand and chooses the melee combat path, and with that, he will certainly defeat the evil god, leaving everyone around him surprised. Looking at his arm, the protagonist sees the symbol on his hand. However, no one believed that the famous Setsuna, the genius, would choose that path. Closing his book, his teacher explains that he was interested in teaching him everything he knew, and with that, he could become the strongest mage of all, and the two of them would share in glory. But Setsuna says it would all be meaningless in 10 years. 10 years before humanity is defeated, and 5 years until Vindrake appears. He has all the knowledge from his first life, but no practical experience with melee combat magic. After some time, it is announced that second-year students should proceed to their respective field classrooms. Setsuna looks for Leo, but it seems he wasn't there. So Setsuna approaches someone, asking if they could show him the way. However, they quickly move away from him, trying to avoid him. Everyone was talking among themselves, and the protagonist couldn't understand anything. The background characters think he wants to show off for choosing such a path. Meanwhile, Setsuna notices that he is being treated differently just for choosing melee combat. Realizing he would have to find the way himself, he thinks there must be a campus map in the courtyard. But as he walks, he hears someone casting a spell, and he finds it strange to have a fight in a place like that. A red-haired girl tells a man to return her brooch, as her mother gave it to her. The group notes that the brooch is a mana-storing tool, and since it's a high-class item, people like her shouldn't be using it. Setsuna realizes that the one fighting belongs to the melee combat department, and the others are from long-range magic. With fire in his hands, the man tells her to try and take it from him, with her weak melee combat magic. Then he fires a fireball at the girl, who luckily dodges quickly. Setsuna observes her enhancing her physical abilities with melee combat magic. But despite that, even if she can dodge the magic, she wouldn't be able to attack him due to the range. The girl says she will never let them keep the brooch her mother gave her, people like them. With that, the girl casts a magic called Mana Blade. However, even that would be useless, said the man, because that dagger would never be able to reach him. The fireball collides with her Mana Blade, knocking it to the ground. The man finds her pathetic for doing this. She should give up. After all, no matter what she does, he will always be superior. And then he launches another fireball at the girl. But, however, when it seemed like everything was over for the red-haired girl, Setsuna rushes toward her, saving her at the last moment. The three men are surprised to see Setsuna's sudden move. However, Setsuna asks the girl if she knows where the melee combat department is, as he really wants someone to guide him there. The girl is obviously confused by Setsuna's question, but a background character asks if he is Setsuna Cromwell. Even so, looking at his hand, it's obvious he chose melee combat magic. The blonde man found it all perfect. After all, since Setsuna specializes in melee combat, they would be able to hit him as much as they wanted. But Setsuna already knew that the magic he chose was weak. However, it all depends on how you use it, and as he observed, he noticed there was room for improvement. Setsuna says that, despite this, it doesn't determine the outcome of the battle. The girl tries to stop him, but it's too late. The blonde man quickly casts his magic. Setsuna channels magic into his legs, using physical enhancements solely for leg strength. With that, he easily dodges the fireball shots. He realizes that, at this speed, he could easily evade the spells. So, since he can now move freely, he decides to push himself even further. Setsuna taunts him, asking if all he knows is how to use fireballs. But the man tells him to shut up while still finding his movements extremely odd. Conjuring magic with both hands, referencing Dragon Ball, he says he's not joking around. He hurls the fireball towards Setsuna, but Setsuna slices through it with a mana blade. The man is shocked to see his magic dissipated by Setsuna's blade strike. The girl is surprised as well, as even she didn't know it was possible to cut through that. Setsuna explains that it was possible because, in a magical battle, the one with more proficiency prevails. The reason he became the strongest in the world, even without high magical power, was his precision in controlling mana. Thinking to himself, he notes that this magic is more useful than he thought since he can combine his power with speed. Out of options, the blonde man declares he will cast a very powerful spell. His friends try to stop him, but he doesn't listen and begins casting. However, in the blink of an eye, Setsuna rushes toward him. Without time to complete his incantation, Setsuna appears in front of him. Then, our protagonist channels magic into his fist, and punches him in the stomach with his mana punch. Seeing the man get struck, everyone around is shocked as he remains lying on the ground. Setsuna found it impressive because, as long as the opponent was within his reach, he could fight even with that combat magic. Scared, one of the blonde man's friends found it strange, as combat magic typically wouldn't be able to do that. Raising his hand, Setsuna demands the girl's brooch back. Having no choice, the man hands it over, as he has no other option but to comply. With that, the group leaves and Setsuna approaches the girl and returns the brooch, as it seemed important to her. The The girl thanks Setsuna for his kindness, and said she hadn't introduced herself yet. Her name is Layla Rosewill. The protagonist introduces himself as well, but the girl already knew, since he's famous, and she asks why someone like him chose combat magic. He changes the subject, as even if he explained it was to defeat the evil god, no one would believe him, so he asks her to take him to the department. Layla says the orientation has already started, so he tells her to hurry. As they walk, he notices the department is at the far end of the campus. This only proves how unpopular melee combat magic really is. Running, Layla asks how Setsuna created that mana blade. He explains that it depends on his mana control. After all, combat magic can be used in many ways depending on the circumstances. If he manages to become a master of combat magic, maybe he could neutralize the evil god's dissipator. That way, he could gain another advantage against him. Shifting the scene, Setsuna and the headmaster are sitting together. The headmaster removes his gloves, revealing he has two different magical paths. Looking at his right hand, Setsuna sees summoning magic, but the seal on the other hand is something he's never seen before. He asks what kind of seal it is, but the headmaster explains that he will reveal it when the time is right. The headmaster says he will entrust the secret of his second magic to him. However, he had never spoken about this magic because, after the emergency with the evil god, he had been assassinated. This means he felt the danger tied to the headmaster's second path. With this in mind, he is determined to learn it and change the world's fate. The girl says they've reached the place. Still deep in thought, Setsuna wonders how he will earn the headmaster's recognition. The professor of that department asks about their tardiness. Layla explains there was a reason for it, but the professor doesn't seem to care. He explains that it didn't matter if he had great achievements. In that place, he had no value at all. Getting closer to Setsuna, he says that he is trash now that he has joined the melee combat magic department. Setsuna asks if he wasn't proud of the melee combat magic he was teaching, and why he had been rude to him the entire time. Irritated, the teacher found it very reckless of Setsuna to speak that way to his teacher. However, Setsuna believes that there are still undiscovered possibilities in combat magic. With that, the teacher feels the urge to break the boy's nose, but since he was so confident, he should prove himself. While the students trained, a green-haired man tried to strike the stone, but to no avail. He couldn't even leave a crack on the stone. The teacher explains to Setsuna that this would be the first test to determine his ranking. That black iron stone had a crystal embedded in it, and Setsuna needed to extract it as quickly as possible. However, those who fail are punished. Irritated, the teacher tells them to try harder since none of them could even damage it. But the students didn't know how to break it since it was so tough. Walking a bit further, the teacher leads Setsuna to a stone that was unoccupied. He explains that Setsuna had 10 minutes and would need to show the possibilities of melee combat magic he had talked about. Layla thinks this is all unfair since it's impossible to break that stone in just 10 minutes. However, the teacher doesn't seem to care. Then, Setsuna walks up to the stone and touches it. Mocking Setsuna, the teacher tells him to kneel and apologize if he wants a little more time. But then, our protagonist says that just 10 seconds will be enough. The teacher finds this reckless on Setsuna's part, and his friend Layla also thought so. That stone, besides being large, was of high quality, and even the teacher could only break it after 30 minutes. With an excited look on his face, Setsuna says there will be no second chance. While concentrating his energy, he thinks about gaining the director's recognition, but to achieve that, he has to at least be the best in that place. Taking his mana blade, he charges at the stone, as he cannot let things like this stand in the way of his goal. After striking the stone, apparently, nothing happens. The teacher starts mocking Setsuna. However, the stone didn't show any effect at first because it was destroyed from the inside out. Then, Setsuna retrieves the crystal from it, once again stating that it only took 10 seconds. Layla and the others were astonished by Setsuna's incredible strength, but the teacher seemed incredulous, saying it was cheating. Since he himself couldn't scratch that stone in 10 minutes, for a mere student to break it in 10 seconds seemed like cheating to him. However, Setsuna tells him to go back to being a student instead of a teacher. The teacher was quite irritated, but someone called out to him, and, touching his head, asked if he was intimidating the students. Seeing this, he was surprised to see Lionel, the head teacher. Lionel affirms that the boy wasn't cheating. He had simply read the mana flow of the stone and aimed at its weak point. Even though he was an instructor, he couldn't see even that, reprimanding him. With that, Lionel calls the others. He says that Professor Zachary will demonstrate mana defense. Then, Lionel prepares to punch him, stating that he won't die from something like this if he's been training regularly. Zachary tries to apologize, but it's already too late. Lionel quickly punches him, sending him flying. Watching the whole situation, the protagonist asks what kind of person Lionel is. Approaching him, Lionel pats his back, saying he did very well. And although he is in a low-level department like that, Layano simply wishes him to do his best. However, Setsuna says that he will become the best in the class, even in that department, and won't lose to the others. Layano recognizes Setsuna's spirit, and explains that he will teach him how to learn magic. As he leaves, Layano didn't expect someone like Setsuna to appear, even though he had already chosen someone as the representative. After some time, Layano reintroduces himself to the class. Without delay, he explains that they would need to choose a representative for the inter-class match. Inter-class matches are an event where the 8 magical departments compete. A representative is chosen from each department, and the winner is determined in the tournament. It was during this moment that Setsuna gained the director's recognition, and for this reason, he couldn't lose the position of representative in that department. Layano calls for Setsuna, saying he wasn't the only one to pass the test, as someone had already extracted the crystal before him, using only the strength of their fists. Looking to the side, he sees a person, and Layano calls out to Drago Okred. Staring at him, Drago asks if he is Setsuna Cromwell. Drago questions why he came to this department when he clearly has aptitude for other paths. Setsuna explains that he has important reasons for pursuing combat magic. Suddenly, Drago tells Setsuna to shut his mouth. He explains that his lineage has stood out in combat magic for generations, and on top of that he has been training for 17 years. In an instant, Drago throws a punch that creates a strong gust of wind in their direction. Drago proposes that they fight, as he won't easily give up the position of representative to someone like Setsuna. Setsuna remains unfazed and tells him to come at him. Then, Layano intervenes, announcing they will have a match in 1 week. As he leaves, Drago tells Setsuna not to run away and to fight to the death. Everyone starts debating the situation. Layla, worried, asks Setsuna if he'll be able to win. He admits that he won't, as he cannot do anything against Drago in his current state. However, he has a secret plan. After some time, while walking, they reach a giant tree. Layla asks what it is, and he explains that it's a secret training area. With that place, he plans to become 3 times stronger. The sacred tree is over 1,000 years old. As an aura emanates from the tree, Setsuna gains recognition once again. Confused, Layla asks about the light emitted by the tree. He explains that it's the blessing of the sacred tree. Only those recognized by the sacred tree are granted this blessing, and thanks to it, he can recover his mana. As long as he remains in that place, he won't need to worry about mana. He only needs to train to his limits. Layla finds it all amazing, but despite this, Drago is someone who was naturally born as a melee combat mage. Even so, she decides to help him because he helped her recover her brooch. He's confused by Layla's sudden enthusiasm. In the training room, Layla is surprised to see Drago lifting weights frantically. Drago asks the professor if there are still black steel stones in the garden, but Layano asks if he plans to destroy them. Drago denies it, saying he won't break them. Instead, he'll use them as weights for his training. Watching from afar, Layla is shocked by what she sees. She quickly runs to find our protagonist, wondering if he'll be okay. Meanwhile, Setsuna is at the sacred tree, reading a book on martial arts. Layla tells him not to be so calm in a situation like this. She explains the whole situation, saying that Drago is using black steel stones for push-ups, but this doesn't surprise Setsuna, as it's expected from someone like him. He tells her not to worry because that's also part of his plan, as an aura emerges from his eye. Still confused, she listens as he explains that with physical enhancement, you can strengthen and control the nervous system along with mana. If you need to improve your legs, you simply focus on them, and the same applies to your hands. And in the case of memory, you only need to focus on your head. Then, throwing his coat back, he kicks the air rapidly. He also performs various movements with his mana blade, leaving Layla amazed. Layla finds it all incredible, but Setsuna insists it's still not enough. Suddenly, he feels pain and collapses to the ground. His hand has a severe wound. Setsuna explains that he pushed his muscles to their limit with physical enhancement, which is why it happened. However, despite this, it doesn't seem like a problem to him, as he just needs to focus on healing. And with that, he can strengthen his body in no time. Layla says he doesn't need to push himself so hard and asks if there's another way. But Setsuna explains that he can't defeat Drago without giving it his all, as the opponent he'll face has been training in combat magic for years. In this week, he'll do everything to achieve his goal, breaking and rebuilding himself thousands of times. But Layla says that will be painful for him. But while he was training, he remembered the old days, back when he couldn't use any magic, and he practiced every day. Despite failing many times, he still kept going without giving up. Even though his progress was slow, he continued to improve step by step. And because of that, as long as he could grow stronger, this wouldn't be a challenge for him. Setsuna and Layla trained together, and after some time, she said that Setsuna wasn't just a talented person. He was someone who worked harder than anyone else. On the day of the confrontation, Drago noticed that Setsuna hadn't run away. He stated that he wouldn't stoop to such a level, as he was the representative of the combat department. With that, Lionel prepared to give the signal. As they stared each other down, the match finally began. Without wasting any time, Setsuna dashed toward Drago and kicked him, but Drago blocked it. Then he slid and kicked several more times, pushing Drago back. Even so, Drago had blocked everything with his mana defense. As they stared each other down, Drago quickly rushed at him, delivering a punch that shone brightly. However, as the smoke cleared, Setsuna had defended himself against Drago's blow. This left everyone present in shock. Setsuna realized that it would be the end for him if he took a direct hit. Nevertheless, Drago tried to strike him again, but Setsuna dodged. Drago continued punching Setsuna repeatedly, but he only defended himself without retaliating. Irritated, Drago asked why he was only defending. Despite that, in the end, Setsuna's body remained weak, and Drago said this seemed to be the end for him. Layla watched everything from the stands, wondering if he wouldn't be able to defeat Drago despite all the training he had done. Lionel noticed something. Despite it seeming like Setsuna was being overwhelmed, in reality, he was perfectly reflecting all the attacks with his mana control. Drago kept punching the protagonist relentlessly and said that superiors had always looked down on melee combatants with disdain. His father and he were born into a family that only excelled in melee combat, and he asked if Setsuna knew how much humiliation they had suffered until now. Conjuring a spell in his hand, he said he would change all of that with his own hands. Both conjured the mana blade and began a sword fight, which continued intensely between the two. However, Setsuna remembered what others used to say to him for choosing that path, and with that, he could understand what Drago was saying. Even so, he said they were both aiming for a goal greater than this. Without giving Drago time to think, Setsuna broke his blade. After some time, Drago smiled, and they continued fighting. Setsuna used his physical acceleration enhancement to attack Drago, but Drago blocked it. Layla was happy to see that Setsuna was managing to hold his own against Drago. Despite Drago's exceptional offense and defense, Setsuna's control and growth were even more impressive, and she wondered who would win the fight. Meanwhile, Setsuna realized he would have to create an opening to injure him. Still in the fight, Drago conjured another mana blade and attacked Setsuna, who dodged. Roaring fiercely, Drago launched a powerful blow at Setsuna. Setsuna noticed that Drago was using all his mana in that attack. Looking back, Setsuna realized he was cornered, which pleased Drago. After all, Setsuna wouldn't be able to move freely. With that, Drago concentrated even more, preparing to deliver the final blow to Setsuna. But when he punched him, he realized it was an afterimage. Setsuna explained that by focusing his mana on the spot he had been, he could briefly leave an afterimage. Then the protagonist quickly moved behind Drago, leaving him no time to react. Setsuna delivered his final attack on Drago. After being struck by Setsuna, everyone was astonished by his movements. Lionel realized that Setsuna had aimed for a counterattack, thus gaining the advantage. With that, Lionel declared the match over, and the winner was Setsuna Cromwell. Still lying on the ground, Drago tried to get up. This surprised everyone around, as he had taken a direct hit and could still stand. However, the blow he had received had been adjusted so it wouldn't be fatal. Setsuna extended a hand to Drago, but then Drago asked him something, the reason why he fought. Setsuna stated that he fought so he wouldn't lose anyone else, and so nothing would ever be taken from him again, and says he will become stronger than anyone else. Drago understands and admits his defeat. Setsuna realizes that Drago's strength could be a great asset in the fight against the evil god. Arriving at the location, Lionel raises Setsuna's hand, announcing that he has been chosen as the representative of the melee combat department. A few days later, Lionel says it's time for the representatives to meet, and he warns Setsuna to be careful. Closing the door, Setsuna walks to the room where everyone is gathered. The blonde man with glasses taunts Setsuna. He says it's impressive to see someone come to this place just to expose their own shame. Seeing the emblem, Setsuna realizes that he is the representative of the enchantment magic department. Stepping on Setsuna's shoe, the blonde man says he will be his opponent in the first round. In the past 100 years, not a single person from the combat department has won that tournament. But before he can provoke further, Setsuna steps on the blonde man's shoe, saying he didn't know they had a unique way of greeting each other, and asking if he was doing it correctly, clearly mocking him. These words irritate the blonde man. With a cold expression, Setsuna declares that the combat department will win this year. Backing off, the blonde man tells him not to say whatever comes to mind. However, the director arrives at the scene, saying they should wait for the match to begin before fighting. Everyone around quickly bows in respect to the director. Setsuna already knows what's happening, as it's the same as it was before his regression. The pink-haired girl says it's an honor to meet the director, and promises to give her best and showcase her abilities during the match. Looking at her, Setsuna notices that Carol's charm hasn't changed at all. She was a formidable opponent he had fought before. Even though he won, he still needed to be cautious. The director thanks everyone for earning the right to represent their respective departments, and says he is delighted to see 8 great talents together. He explains that the matches are conducted in a one-on-one tournament format, with opponents chosen randomly. The first match will be melee combat magic versus enchantment magic. The second match, healing magic versus long-range magic. The third match, formation magic versus summoning magic. And finally, the last match, uncategorized special magic versus alchemy magic. The director explains that the matches are treated as practical lessons and will begin in 10 days. Until then, they can either learn new magic or rest. Once again, he says he looks forward to seeing everyone's fights. As the director leaves, everyone bows to him as a sign of respect. That place was the only opportunity Setsuna had to talk to the director. Setsuna follows the director and calls out to him. The director asks if he is the representative of the melee combat department. Setsuna confirms, introducing himself as Setsuna Cromwell, and saying he has a request. Setsuna asks if the director would teach him his magic if he wins the tournament. The director finds it unnecessary for him, as he specializes in melee combat. However, Setsuna clarifies that he isn't talking about summoning magic but rather the director's other magic. This obviously surprises the director, who asks Setsuna how he knows about this. Sensing the overwhelming mana, Setsuna realizes the director is on guard. But despite this, the second magic is absolutely necessary to fight the evil god, and he couldn't simply give up. Setsuna explains he can reveal the reason. He declares he will win and surprise everyone, asking the director to have faith in him. After staring at each other for a while, the director seems convinced by Setsuna's words. With that, he promises to teach him about his second magic if he wins the tournament. However, the path will not be easy. Despite this, Setsuna assures him he will prove his victory in the tournament. Bowing to the director, Setsuna leaves. After some time, he reflects while eating. Setsuna thinks about thanking Layla for bringing him that delicious bread. He needs to make preparations, as there are only 10 days until the event. Suddenly, Setsuna is hit by something, but fortunately, he defends himself. Once again, the blonde man was behind it. He had planned to strike from Setsuna's blind spot. Dusting off his shoulder, Setsuna questions the blonde man's behavior. Irritated, the blonde man says he wants to fight him right now for being humiliated like that. However, Setsuna explained that it was the consequence of his own actions. After thinking for a moment, he realized it would be a problem if it were reported. So, he dispersed his golems, saying he would be better prepared for the match. Reflecting, the protagonist admitted that his opponent was reasonable when it came to talent, having gathered all that material and controlling it simultaneously. Meanwhile, he regretted that the bread had fallen. The next day, Lionel and the class were set to analyze a battle between Drago and Setsuna. With that said, Lionel asked both if they understood what he had mentioned. Drago admitted that he lost control of his mana and emotions, and Setsuna acknowledged that he lacked raw power, as he had previously been outmatched by Drago in strength. Hearing this, Lionel was pleased to see that they recognized their weaknesses, and starting today, they would grow stronger through the match. Layla asked if that match would serve as training for the interclass match. Lionel explained that the opponent in the first round would be Noel, who, according to Setsuna, could use his golems for both offense and defense. Additionally, the golems had physical bodies and employed a fighting style similar to melee combat magic. For that day's match, Lionel instructed Drago to focus on his speed, acting as though he were multiple golems, and Setsuna would need to detect Drago's attacks and counter them. As they prepared for the simulated fight, Drago said it wouldn't be like last time. However, Setsuna replied that he had been waiting for this moment. Drago quickly charged forward, and Setsuna dodged. But Drago smiled as he moved to his right. Our protagonist realized that his reaction was too slow. Watching them, Lionel praised Drago's movements. Without giving Setsuna time to breathe, Drago kept pressuring him. After some time, Setsuna began to read Drago's movements and managed to dodge his strike. Lionel remarked that it was good and instructed him to dodge and counterattack. The fight continued, and the protagonist prepared to strike back. After some time, both were exhausted from the fight. Their teacher approached, offering them drinks, and said that in a few days, the protagonist would be able to handle several golems easily. Setsuna thanked his teacher's encouraging words. This pleased Lionel, who noted how quickly Setsuna was learning. Finally, the day arrived, the interclass match of the Elmridge Academy of Magic. Everyone was eager to see who would win the tournament. A background character asked who they were betting on. Sitting nearby, one of the bullies from the beginning of the manhwa shouted for Setsuna to win because he had bet on him. At that moment, the representative of long-range magic arrived. Looking very relaxed, a bystander explained that the match stages changed randomly each time, and this time, the theme was a desert, which clearly pleased the blonde-haired man. The spectators in the stands shouted for him to win. Layla grew irritated by the provocations directed at Setsuna, but then the announcer signaled the start of the match. The blonde-haired man called out to Setsuna and asked if he knew what he was holding in his hands. It was a black steel stone, a critical fragment for creating a golem, and by fusing it with the sand, a golem emerged. He emphasized that not even a blade could scratch his golem, and with a bag of stones he tossed them into the sand, creating an army of golems. Layla was surprised by the sheer number of golems. Confidently, the blonde-haired man said he could create infinite golems with that sand, making it impossible for Setsuna to get close to him. The spectators in the stands told Setsuna to surrender, as the match's outcome was already decided. Looking at Setsuna, the blonde-haired man asked if he had anything to say. However, Setsuna said he was disappointed in him, as he hadn't expected this to be his trump card. Irritated by Setsuna's words, the man quickly sent his army against him. As the golems advanced towards Setsuna, an explosion occurred. The man assumed this was the end of Setsuna, but as the smoke cleared, our Setsuna had destroyed one of the golems, stating that he had mastered the black steel stone. This left the blonde-haired man in shock, as those golems were incredibly tough. However, he claimed it wouldn't be a problem for him, as he could easily create more. At that moment, Setsuna stated that he specialized in close combat, even against those golems. He will not lose, thus destroying all the golems he had summoned. With no other choice, he tried to summon more golems. But Setsuna quickly advanced toward him and punched him, making him fall to the ground. However, no one knew what was happening because of the sand. Still, they could see one person standing. It was Setsuna Cromwell, the winner of the first match. Setsuna and Layla were pleased with this news. The spectators in the stands were shocked by what had happened. They then assumed that the blonde man, Noel, had self-destructed, as someone from the combat department could never win. However, that had not been a self-destruction. With that, Setsuna caught the attention of the man with purple hair. Shifting scenes, the second match began. Layla invited Setsuna to sit next to her to watch the match. He thanked her and said he might find some references to use by observing the fight. They watched the battle intently, where the representative of the summoning department, Carol, had all the advantage. Carol used her summons to launch several blue crystals toward her opponent. Meanwhile, the other representative, from the formation magic department, tried to get closer to her. However, even though he was cornered by Carol, his movements were impressive. Layla remarked that the other magic paths were incredible, but despite that, she wanted to become strong in combat magic. Hearing this, Setsuna asked why she chose that path. She explained that she had been saved by a combat mage in the past. While playing with her brother, they were attacked by a bear, but a combat mage ran to help them. That inspired her to help others around her and become stronger. Embarrassed, she said her reason was quite childish. However, Setsuna didn't think so. After all, she had chosen that path in her heart, and she would certainly become stronger. A little flustered, she thanked him for his words. At that moment, her friend Leo appeared, calling him over. Leo was the second strongest in the long-range magic department after Setsuna. Leo approached him and said he had been incredible in his match and asked if the girl next to him had anything going on with him. But Setsuna didn't understand anything Leo had said. Blushing, she walked away from them, saying Leo was wrong and that they were just friends. Setsuna asked why Leo hadn't become his department's representative since he could have defeated Actar. As he sat down, Leo warned Setsuna to be cautious of Actar's dirty moves. He explained that he had been tricked by Actar and lost his spot as a representative. Our protagonist understood everything. He knew that person would do anything to win. Changing scenes, Actar opened a box and smiled at it, seeming to be plotting something. Finally, the second round began, where Setsuna would face Actar. The chosen theme was Scorching Hell. They realized this theme was an extreme advantage for Setsuna's opponent. Meanwhile, two men were talking, and Actar thanked the head of the department for his help. Annoyed, the man said he would make Setsuna regret choosing hand-to-hand combat. In another scene, Setsuna asked Layla to avoid touching that vase. After all, it could completely drain her mana with a single touch. She naturally asked why it was there, and Setsuna explained it was another trap set for him. Concerned, Layla asked if he was okay. He confirmed, as he had avoided contact with it, and blamed Actar for it. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and 3 children appeared, wanting to deliver a bouquet of flowers. Layla asked what it was, and they said someone had asked them to deliver it to them. However, when they pointed to the person, they were no longer there. Confused, Layla asked if it could be a fan of Setsuna. At that moment, the blonde-haired girl began to feel unwell. Setsuna noticed the mark that appeared on the girl. Quickly, he kicked the bouquet of flowers away. He explained that it was a poisonous plant called the neem. The other children also began to feel sick. Desperate, Setsuna hadn't expected Actar to go this far. If they didn't find a healer, it could become irreversible. Layla asked if the condition was urgent, which the protagonist confirmed. Setsuna asked her to step back, as there was still a chance she could be infected just by being near them. She said it was okay and asked him to leave the children with her, showing her badge. Seeing that, he realized that the object was the magical tool that stores mana. Then Layla began to use the healing magic her mother had taught her. And so, she healed the children, and the marks gradually disappeared. Despite this, Layla said she could only use that in an emergency, but it was fine because this was one. Setsuna expressed his gratitude to Layla. With that, he grabbed the bouquet of flowers and quickly ran, so that he could rid himself of the poison. However, if he did that in a crowded place, the toxins could spread. The poison began to take effect on Setsuna. Then he reached the sacred tree and threw the poison into the air. He cut it into several pieces, collapsing in exhaustion. At the tournament, people wondered where Setsuna was. A background character told everyone that the competitor Setsuna seemed to have quit, so he would declare Akhtar the winner. However, a voice called out, telling the man to wait. It shouted that he hadn't given up and angrily demanded Akhtar fight him. But Akhtar asked how he would do that in his current state. Akhtar said he had given a gift, and it seemed Setsuna had accepted it. Our protagonist asked why Akhtar had used poison and involved those innocent children. Sarcastically, Akhtar asked what Setsuna was talking about since he didn't recall that. With a sadistic smile, Akhtar said even those children could be used by the elite. This made Setsuna even angrier. Then the background character announced the start of the second round. Akhtar began by casting his magic, and Setsuna dodged. People questioned what had happened to him since his mana was unstable. Even though the poison had been purified by the blessing of the sacred tree, there wasn't enough time to remove all the poison from his body. His opponent didn't give Setsuna a chance to think and began launching multiple spells at him, forcing him into defensive mode. With all of this, the department head was pleased with the situation, and said Setsuna should prepare for the humiliation that was coming. Looking to his side, Setsuna noticed Layla hadn't returned and prayed the children were okay. Preparing another spell, Akhtar asked if something was bothering him. The spectators in the stands mocked him, saying he couldn't defeat someone with long-range magic. Akhtar quickly launched another spell at Setsuna, forcing him to defend with his mana shield. But even that wasn't enough. His mana shield was destroyed, leaving Setsuna gravely injured by the impact of the attack. Akhtar mocked Setsuna's situation. Then Setsuna asked why Akhtar hadn't ended the fight yet. After all, he should be preventing himself from being overwhelmed by multiple consecutive attacks. However, all Akhtar was doing was provoking him. He claimed Setsuna's analytical skills were impressive, but he couldn't be underestimated, and told Setsuna to look around. His friend Leo was surprised to see all of it. Akhtar explained that his goal was to avoid unnecessary risks. With that, he began preparing his storm cannon. Confident, he declared this would be the end of Setsuna. At that moment, Layla called out to our protagonist, saying the children were safe, showing him her brooch. Smiling, he realized he no longer needed to worry about them. Then he began healing his injuries, stating this was his comeback. This, of course, surprised Akhtar as he recovered. He explained it was a simple physical enhancement, activating his cells throughout his body while fighting and dealing with the poison. And he said Akhtar had fallen for his trap and called him a coward. Irritated, Akhtar told Setsuna not to get too confident despite the situation. The department head told Akhtar to finish it quickly. Then Akhtar cast the spell at him, and even though Setsuna had no terrain to support him, he could still do something about it. With that, he reflected Akhtar's attack, leaving everyone surprised, and then Akhtar caught his own spell. Shouting, he asked Setsuna if he thought he couldn't handle his own magic. But that was all part of Setsuna's strategy to jump toward him. And with that, Setsuna struck Akhtar with his blade. While Akhtar lay on the ground, Setsuna was announced as the winner of the fight, making his friends happy with his victory. However, they noticed something. The stone was cracking, making both of them fall toward the lava. While still falling, the protagonist had to think of something, but Akhtar was still unconscious. He grabbed Akhtar's foot to try to save him, and then a girl called for her Fenrir, saving both of them, thanks to Carol's summoning magic. Carol said he would have been fine without her help. Setsuna thanked her for rescuing him. She was a highly talented competitor, the famous Carol from the summoning department. He quickly realized he would have to prepare to fight her soon. Meanwhile, in the stands, everyone found it surprising. The combat magic representative had won again. If things continued this way, it would definitely be unprecedented. The chief grew even more irritated with Setsuna. He declared that he would not forget what Setsuna had done. Layla thanked Setsuna for his hard work. Then, approaching her, he asked about the children, to which she replied that they were sleeping in the infirmary at the moment. The doctor had said they would recover soon. Hearing that was a relief for Setsuna. Suddenly, he felt something strange and quickly looked to his side. This worried Layla, who asked if something had happened to him. What he felt was a threatening magic with a cold, murderous intent. He wondered what was coming in this tournament. In another scene, the protagonist realized he needed a new power to oppose the mysterious presence that had appeared. At that moment, Lionel arrived and asked why he had been called. Setsuna replied that he needed his assistance once more. He called him by the name, Comet Fist. Lionel, That name was nostalgic for Lionel, and he asked where Setsuna had heard it. Setsuna had heard that name before his regression. Rumors said Lionel had defeated fierce dragons with a single blow, but he had left the army. With that, Setsuna asked Lionel to teach him his magic. It had been a long time since Lionel had been called Comet Fist. Setsuna said that was irrelevant at the moment because, among all combatants, Lionel was the strongest. While smoking his cigarette, Lionel asked why Setsuna sought power, as he already seemed strong enough. However, Setsuna stated it still wasn't enough, and he didn't want to lose to anyone, even if one day his opponent was a god. Hearing those words sparked Lionel's interest. He then decided to teach Setsuna the technique, although it wasn't something he usually taught students. Lionel began focusing mana into his fist. The protagonist noticed an immense amount of mana gathering. Lionel explained that the technique consumed a lot of mana, so it couldn't be used multiple times. He then said one strike would be more than enough and asked for Setsuna's full attention. With that, Lionel punched using his technique, leaving everything around destroyed. That power was impressive, but it wasn't effective for one-on-one combat, so Lionel asked if Setsuna was okay with that. The protagonist said he was counting on it. With that, their training began. In another scene, Carol was sitting with someone else. The person congratulated her on reaching the finals. They noted her opponent would be a hand-to-hand combatant and asked how confident she was. She replied that victory or defeat depended on luck, but she would still do her best in the match. She then asked if the person would like another cup. As they left, the mysterious person showed her a kind of card. It made her fall to the ground, and that person seemed to be plotting something against Setsuna. The next day, Setsuna was training his technique with Lionel. The teacher didn't expect Setsuna to master it in less than a week, as it had taken Lionel himself 2 years. With that, Lionel said he had taught him the Comet Fist, but Setsuna disagreed, calling it the charged shot. The next match was about to begin. Carol from the summoning department versus Setsuna from hand-to-hand combat. Once again, the spectators in the stands wondered who they thought would win. The chubby one said it would definitely be Carol. However, the girl said she was rooting for Setsuna. The 3 children showed their support for him. The chosen theme for the match was the ruins of the gods. To prevent any damage from this battle, a strong barrier was put in place. Layla was anxious about the fight, as the theme wouldn't be a disadvantage for Setsuna. Looking at the director, Setsuna expected him to keep his promise to teach him about his second magic. With that, Carol called out to him, asking them to get along. Then the final match began. Without giving any time, Carol summoned her Fenrir and used a breath attack toward him. However, he dodged. That attack resembled a snowstorm. Carol was surprised by his movements, but she wouldn't give him a second chance and launched several more attacks with her Fenrir. Setsuna activated his physical enhancement tenfold. He dodged all of Fenrir's attacks and launched a counterattack against it. In the stands, Layla was happy to see he managed to land an attack. However, Lionel explained that beasts are summoned with condensed mana, so an injury like that would heal instantly. Carol acknowledged the boy's strength. Then she began to alter the climate around her alongside her Fenrir. He noticed everything had turned to ice. Thanks to the barrier, the freezing mana was trapped inside. In this frozen state, Fenrir's attacks would naturally become stronger. She asked what Setsuna would do in this situation. Our protagonist said he wouldn't win in a battle of endurance, so he needed to decide everything with his charged shot. He continued dodging all the attacks. Meanwhile, the onlookers noticed that Setsuna was on the defensive again. The children were worried about him. However, Lionel observed something in Setsuna. For him to use the charged shot, he needed time. But with his mana control, he was able to charge his fist while still fighting. That was certainly not an easy thing to do. Carol realized he was planning something and wouldn't let it happen. With that, she summoned a second beast, leaving everyone astonished by her talent. Then both beasts attacked Setsuna together. Fortunately, he managed to quickly attack both of them. Setsuna knew she had an ace up her sleeve, precisely because she was an incredible mage. She was surprised to see that the protagonist had reflected her attack. With that, he prepared for another strike. However, a mysterious person said it all ended there and snapped his fingers. Carol began to writhe, which left Setsuna in shock because that mana resembled the evil gods. She then raised her hand against her will, and countless beasts began to appear in the battle. The onlookers thought it was incredible, but obviously that mana wasn't hers. She begged for the match to be cancelled along with the barrier and asked where the mages were. However, the man had already done something to prevent that. The beast continued attacking our protagonist. He tried to locate the owner of that mana. The mysterious person asked if he couldn't look around. Then one of the beasts managed to attack him, slamming him into the wall. Layla was worried about him. He lay on the ground, his arm injured. Smiling, the person declared it would be impossible for him to locate them, and it was only a matter of time before it all ended. It was a dire situation for Setsuna because he didn't have the time to use his charged shot. Meanwhile, Carol was at her limit, If this didn't end, she would lose control of her mana and perhaps her life. Setsuna kicked one of the beasts. He also realized Carol was being controlled by someone. Crying, the girl begged Setsuna to flee before they killed him. Meanwhile, Setsuna frantically dodged the attacks and attempted to counterattack. The fight between Setsuna and the beasts continued without pause. The director merely watched everything. Leonel noticed that Setsuna's mana was almost at its limit, so he needed to quickly find the mage who created the barrier to assist. He begged Setsuna not to die because of him. Then, a beast appeared behind him and managed to pierce his leg. Everyone was in shock at the entire situation. With that, he wouldn't be able to use his magic, and the man ordered his beasts to finish Setsuna off. Roaring ferociously, one of the beasts bit his arm, making him scream in pain. In another scene, Leonel asked his students what the most important thing to do during a battle was. They said it would be to minimize the damage taken and thus close the distance between them. That was correct, but there was another important thing. It was their fighting spirit, to be able to strike their opponent. He explained they would undergo endurance training. Returning to the present, Setsuna was injured, but he said he had succeeded. Then he began gathering mana in his fist. This surprised the man because even he hadn't noticed that detail. Meanwhile, the protagonist said he only needed to finish them all with a single strike since they were out of control. Shouting, he declared that he poured all his remaining mana into this one attack. And then, finally, he used his charged shot, destroying everything around him. With that, Carol fell, but he quickly saved her before she hit the ground. He felt relieved to see that she was okay. The spectators were shocked to see that Carol had lost. Then, the announcer declared Setsuna Cromwell as the winner. After a century, someone from the hand-to-hand combat department won the tournament. This left everyone stunned, shouting all around. Layla was nearly in tears of joy to see Setsuna unharmed. Meanwhile, someone else benefited from a bet they had placed. The mysterious man was surprised to see that Setsuna survived even under those circumstances, and said he no longer needed that mage. However, just as he was about to act, someone had already found him. He then removed the symbol from the mage's neck. Lionel rushed to the scene but, upon arriving, saw the mage lying on the ground. With that, the barrier was finally lifted. The director approached the protagonist. He explained that Carol had been under someone's control. That must have been the effect of a magical device, and he asked Setsuna to leave the rest to the academy. Calling the boy, the director acknowledged Setsuna's power and said he would keep his promise. He then asked Setsuna to come to his chamber the next day. Meanwhile, in the medical wing, Setsuna had his wounds healed. The nurse said his external injuries were healed but couldn't say the same for his internal ones and advised him to rest. Then someone knocked on the door, and many people entered. Setsuna said he was already feeling better. Layla was happy to see him, and also congratulated him on his victory in the tournament. Then a man told Setsuna that he was the pride of hand-to-hand combat magic and congratulated him as well. The children said he had been amazing. After some time, the others finally said their goodbyes. Leonel then explained the situation, saying that the formation mage had survived and that someone had been controlling him. But he added that both Carol and the mage needed to rest, as the mage would be investigated after he woke up. Additionally, during that incident, it seemed like Setsuna had been targeted. Lionel asked if Setsuna had any idea about what was going on. In another scene, someone opened a door. Noticing a barrier, they easily broke it. They said they should eliminate Carol and, after that, Setsuna. After all, they needed to erase everything connected to them. But before Carol could be attacked, Setsuna quickly intervened, blocking the strike. Setsuna said he knew they would try to eliminate Carol. However, he did not expect to find his friend Leo in that place. Laughing, Leo said he had been caught but wondered how since he had erased all his tracks. Setsuna said there hadn't been any at first, but after seeing Leo's actions, he became convinced. Staring at each other for a moment, Leo suggested they talk outside, and so they did. Leo then seemed to have a question for Setsuna and asked how long he had known that he was the culprit. Setsuna explained it was because Leo had supported Akhtar. Even though Akhtar used dirty methods, there was no way he could have lost to him. Surprised, Leo hadn't expected the protagonist to figure it out to that extent. With that, Setsuna said he was now certain. At the same time the match ended, Leo's mana was infused in the attack. As he approached, Leo asked who Setsuna was referring to. He asked if Setsuna knew about this great person. Setsuna was startled and noticed the change in Leo's mana, realizing that Leo had now become a subordinate of the evil god and that he had to stop him. Leo said he would have more fun with Setsuna, but he had other things to do. Bidding farewell to his friend, Setsuna quickly conjured his blade. He advanced toward Leo, but when his blade made contact, it dispersed. Seeing this, Setsuna realized the situation was the same as when he faced the evil god. Leo explained that he had received an authority capable of nullifying mana, thanks to that person. This made it impossible for Setsuna to attack him. However, Setsuna didn't give up and continued attacking. The protagonist tried to strike Leo from his blind spot, as his authority only activated upon contact with an attack. But when he attempted this, his blade dispersed again. It was useless because Leo's mana detection was more efficient than his. Thus, Leo threw the protagonist away with his flame magic. Apologizing for not waiting for him to fully recover before they fought, he acknowledged Setsuna's talent, noting that combat magic typically wouldn't reach this level, but if he had chosen ranged magic, he might have had a chance. However, that no longer mattered because he was going to die at that very moment. Then, he attacked directly at the protagonist's wound to end it quickly. Gasping, he asked why Leo was doing all of this. In response, Leo explained that he was tired of this world and, in some way, wanted to destroy everything. Irritated, he asked if all this was because of such a ridiculous reason. Recalling everyone who had died in the war, he screamed in anger and told him to stop this nonsense. He asked if he was really the Leo he knew, but without giving him time, Leo began preparing another spell. Setsuna was still too far to use his blade, so he had to act quickly and exploit his blind spot. As he prepared to launch his charged shot, he realized it wouldn't be enough because Leo's magic was too fast. At that moment, someone appeared, stopping Leo's magic. Looking to the side, they saw it was the director. Seeing the director, Setsuna felt somewhat relieved. The director apologized for being late. Then he asked if Leo had been responsible for the tournament incident. Leo was surprised to see that the director had also noticed that. It was expected of the best student of that magical academy. With that, the director began emanating an intense aura. He declared he would restrain Leo, attacking him with an intense flame. This attack left Setsuna astonished to see such incredible firepower. However, it was useless against Leo, who dispersed all the magic. Leo said he would have been in trouble if he didn't have the authority granted by that person. The director was surprised to see that the magic nullification was real. Our protagonist asked how he already knew about this. Leo explained that it was already written in the Silverrock family archives. Back then, a power had awakened, and magic nullification was one of those powers. Walking toward them, Leo declared that their magic wouldn't stand a chance against him, and that applied even to Director Donan's Silverrock. Leo continued preparing an attack, and Setsuna noticed it would be magic composed of 3 elements. But then, concentrating, the director opened his eyes, and Leo launched his attack. The director told Setsuna to dodge what was coming, and he did so, as did the director, leaving Leo incredulous since he should have hit them. Looking at him, the director asked if he really thought his magic would work only in that situation. Leo admitted the director had an interesting power but asked what he thought of this. Thus, he emitted an aura of the evil god's power. He declared he wouldn't leave any trace of him behind. Soon, the director realized this wouldn't be an easy battle. However, if they fought seriously, the place would be completely destroyed. After exchanging a quick glance, the director began summoning several butterflies. He and his beast then started attacking Leo. Leo realized the director wanted to minimize the damage to the academy. He didn't complain about it, as it was the director's duty. Then the two attacked simultaneously, but Leo's magic prevailed, hitting the beast and causing it to explode. Confident, Leo asked if the director would give up and surrender the victory to him. But it was all just a distraction, and Setsuna emerged during it. Seeing this, Leo found it surprising that he had used the dragon to hide. However, even so, it wouldn't be enough. Setsuna told him he was relying too much on that power. Then he advanced toward Leo, affirming that choosing combat magic was the right decision and that he would prove it with that attack. But Leo told Setsuna not to underestimate the power of that person. With that, Setsuna advanced toward the barrier, destroying it and consequently causing a significant impact on him. Everything around was destroyed by the impact of Setsuna's punch. The director affirmed that, even with magic nullification, there was a limit, and he congratulated Setsuna on his feat. Seeing Leo fallen, he realized his theory was correct. If he landed a high-speed direct attack, it could penetrate his authority, and he wasn't wrong for choosing this path. The main problem had been resolved, and the director said his technique was exceptional. But first, they needed to treat his injuries. However, suddenly, Leo stood up, even after taking a direct hit from Setsuna. Seeing him move after that attack surprised him. Emitting another aura, Leo declared that things were about to get serious. He then cast another spell against him, forcing Setsuna to summon his mana blade to defend. However, upon contact with the spell, his blade was dispersed. This sent Setsuna flying, crashing into the wall. The director called out to Setsuna, but he was on the verge of passing out, and questioned whether Leo had combined long-range magic with nullification magic. At that moment, a flashback showed Setsuna practicing with Leo. Leo said he would aim for his head. However, Setsuna didn't understand what he meant. Still, a voice in his head said he already knew the flaw in him as a hero, a loser who couldn't even save his companions. Suddenly, Setsuna woke up in a bed. Layla was surprised to see him wake up so suddenly. She expressed her concern for him, but seeing him awake, she felt relieved. Setsuna asked where he was, and Layla explained they were in the academy's infirmary. She explained that he had been unconscious for 3 days. Hearing this frustrated him, as he had been defeated not once but twice by the power of the evil god. However, an idea came to mind, and he quickly asked Layla where the director was. She explained he was in his chamber. She asked what he was planning to do. He explained that he needed to confirm something with his own eyes, which only made her more worried. Touching her shoulder, he apologized for making her worry about him, but he said he had to go. Finally, after saying this to Layla, he left the infirmary. Meanwhile, in the chamber, the director was addressing everyone. Liano soon realized they were about to get busier, but suddenly, Setsuna burst through the door, calling for the director. Seeing Setsuna awake made the director happy. Liano remarked that he had lost badly. However, Setsuna asked to talk later, as Layla and Drago were worried about him. Acknowledging the situation, he apologized to the director for disappointing him. He then asked the director to explain what had happened after everything, but he quickly felt pain in his body. The director told him not to worry, as he still had severe injuries. He then explained that after Setsuna was defeated, Leo didn't finish him off because he had used too much mana. Despite this, Leo had enjoyed himself greatly. A rift then appeared in the space, and Leo bid farewell to the director, saying they would meet again in the future. The director didn't want Leo to escape, but beyond that portal was something he had never seen before, so he needed to prepare. Setsuna understood the situation. Those eyes from the portal and an unknown existence. Perhaps he knew something. The director quickly asked if Setsuna knew anything about it. He urged Setsuna to tell him everything he knew at that moment. Removing his glove, Setsuna explained he knew quite a lot about that magic. After showing this, the director asked if Setsuna trusted him now. Setsuna wondered if he should tell the director about the future because time travel was something no one would believe. Seeing this hesitation, the director asked if there was a reason Setsuna wasn't saying anything. Then Setsuna had an idea and told the director to look at his necklace. When he looked, he noticed that the blessing of time within it had disappeared. This meant it had already been used in another timeline, which Setsuna confirmed. He explained that he had used it 10 years in the future to atone for his regrets. After some time, the director understood the situation. The future where he would die, and an evil god would emerge into the world. Believing such a future was difficult. However, using the blessing of time to go back 10 years must have come with immense regret. Standing up, the director said that Setsuna had carried an enormous burden until now. So, from now on, he would also help and become part of Setsuna's strength. Hearing this relieved Setsuna, and he thanked the director profusely. With this, he would finally be able to stand against the evil god and perhaps save the world from that cruel fate. Calling out to the protagonist, he said he would teach him a second type of magic that could be used against the evil god. A unique power that didn't belong to any system. It was called spirit magic. After saying this, he asked to change locations. Switching scenes, the director remarked that it brought back nostalgic memories from his past. He explained that spirit magic was a type of magic that fused with a spirit by using mana as a catalyst, thus harnessing immense power. This was a different kind of power, where every combination became possible. Setsuna was surprised, and the director explained that it would be faster to demonstrate it in practice. Then the director's eyes glowed intensely, and Setsuna realized he had used it during the fight with Leo. Suddenly, the director asked them to play rock paper scissors. This obviously confused him, but he did as the director asked, only to lose. The director asked them to play again. After several attempts, the protagonist realized he had lost every single time. The director explained that this was one of the powers of the spirit of time, allowing him to see a few seconds into the future. There were many spirits in the world, and the director gave an example. If someone formed a contract with the spirit of wind, they could fly. And with the spirit of water, they could pass through physical attacks, and so on. This went beyond imagination, and if Setsuna mastered it, he could better utilize combat magic. However, the director explained that this magic required a contract, but there was a preliminary stage before that. He said they would begin it immediately. With that, the director began emanating an aura. He explained that Setsuna would have to become one with nature and feel their presence as they moved through the world. Closing his eyes, he asked the spirits to help him defeat the evil god. However, the protagonist didn't seem to succeed in this test. In shock, Setsuna realized he couldn't feel anything. The director explained that this was caused by his resentment toward nature. He elaborated that Setsuna needed to become one with nature, finding inner peace. In other words, he shouldn't think less but feel more. He tried again but thought too much. Approaching him, the director asked him not to rush. After all, it had taken the director 3 years to achieve it, and he reassured Setsuna that he would master it before the evil god appeared. However, this felt like a long time for the protagonist, who wanted to master it as quickly as possible since they didn't know when the subordinates would attack. The director didn't understand, and Setsuna explained that they came from the same world as the evil god, each possessing unique special powers. Leo was one of them, Setsuna said. Before his regression, he had fought one, and despite having the advantage of long-range magic, the opponent was incredibly strong. The director asked if this was one of the 12 powers, and Setsuna said there were others hiding in the world like Leo. He understood Setsuna's feelings but asked him again not to rush, as it could cause a crisis for him. However, during dungeon training, he might discover something. The protagonist didn't understand, and the director explained that Liano would provide further details later. He assured Setsuna that he would find something to surpass his limits. However, the journey would be harsh, and he urged Setsuna to rest his body properly. Meanwhile, at the same time, several monsters appeared, saying there would be a surprise. When the door opened, Leo said he was late. As he walked in, one of the apostles remarked that Leo had kept them waiting too long and asked if he wanted to die. Another apostle criticized Leo for failing to kill a mere student, acting alone during the incident, and still getting injured. Adding that Leo had fled, he questioned how he would handle the responsibility. Looking up, Leo apologized to his superior, saying he couldn't look cool in front of his best friend. Zagan then told him to wipe that smirk off his face, as it was irritating. After staring at each other for a while, Zagan tried to attack him. However, someone told them to stop, saying they were apostles and should act as one. The apostle Satanakia asked if they understood what he had said. As he spoke, an overwhelming aura emanated in their direction. However, he suggested starting with the reports first. Despite this, Zagan asked how they should deal with Leo and stated that if Leo stood in his way, he would handle it himself. However, Puka requested to leave the assassination to him, as it would be more entertaining that way. Nevertheless, Satanakia said it wasn't necessary, as he had already made a deal. He explained that if it were that person, he would have certainly succeeded in his mission. A few days later, Layla called out to Setsuna. Concerned, she asked if his body was better, to which he affirmed it was. However, she noticed that he seemed more injured after the final match, so something must have happened. The director explained to Setsuna that they couldn't speak about the existence of the evil god, and for now, he had only shared some information with trusted professors. He stated that the investigation into Leo and the academy's security would be left to them. He also informed him that the spirit magic training would be postponed. Returning to the present, Setsuna apologized to Layla and assured her everything was fine. But in the meantime, he knew he needed to recover as quickly as possible and grow stronger. With that, class finally began. Leo announced that they would begin training in conjunction with the college. The training would be conducted alongside other colleges. The sessions were designed to learn about different fighting styles, but now they would need to work together to surpass their limits. Setsuna realized the purpose of the training was to improve teamwork. Leo then mentioned that the training area would be in a one-star dungeon underground. Since it would be dangerous, they would have help from third parties, and the training would begin in 2 weeks. Clenching his fists, Setsuna declared he would heal from his injuries first. Later in the day, Layla asked Setsuna if they could eat together. She suggested they recover and eat plenty before the training, and he agreed to her proposal. Suddenly, some people began recognizing the protagonist, as he had won the tournament using only hand-to-hand combat magic. Many people commented about him. Layla remarked that they were gossiping about him, even though they had mocked him just a few days ago. 3 people appeared in front of them and asked if he was Setsuna. The one who called out to him was Carl from the Nobles' Hall. With that, Carl invited the protagonist to join his hall. Even though only high-ranking nobles could enter, he said he would make an exception for him. If Setsuna joined their hall, nothing would stand in his way. As the tournament winner, such a thing was necessary. Carl then said that girl would ruin his future and urged him not to waste his time with that useless woman. However, Setsuna refused, surprising everyone. He stated that the only ones wasting time were them. Feeling humiliated, Carl drew his blade forge and charged at the protagonist to attack him. However, before Setsuna could react, Layla intervened to prevent the attack. She sternly reminded Carl that fights were not allowed at the academy while glaring at him angrily. After everything, she let go of Carl's arm, and they left but not without throwing insults first. At that moment, after the situation, both smiled at each other, and Setsuna was certain she would become stronger in the future. However, someone called out to them. It was Carol. Setsuna said it was good to see her well, and she replied that it was all thanks to him. Clasping her hands together, she expressed her gratitude to him. She then asked if Setsuna would be willing to come to her room. Hearing this, Layla became completely flustered. Upon arriving at Carol's room, she said she would cook a homemade meal for him as a way of showing gratitude. He thanked her for the hospitality. Layla then offered to help her with it, and Carol gratefully accepted. Previously, Layla had thought it was something inappropriate, but it wasn't the case. Drago asked why he had been invited, and Carol said, "The more, the merrier." Seeing the ingredients, Layla was surprised to realize they had healing properties. While deep in thought, Setsuna knew from the director that Carol didn't remember anything about the incident with Leo. Despite this, he felt relieved that nothing had happened, though there was still the possibility of someone else being targeted. Touching his shoulder, Drago asked if something was wrong. Seeing how hard Setsuna was working and doing everything alone, he suggested that he rest a little. Suddenly, several noises came from the kitchen. He asked if they were doing physical training right in the kitchen. With that, Carol appeared, asking for Drago's help. Carol apologized to Drago for making him wear that apron. Finally, they finished preparing the meal. Setsuna was surprised to see so much food on the table. Sitting in the chair, he prepared to eat the food they had made for him. He used magic on his stomach to improve his digestion. With that, he began eating quickly. But seeing this, Layla asked if he was okay, and he affirmed that he was. The soup was incredibly good and had a wonderful taste, Setsuna said, enchanted by it. Since the soup had been made by Drago, Carol felt defeated. Seeing all the excitement while they ate, he remembered his past life. He vowed that he would never lose anything precious to him again. 2 weeks later, during training, Drago commented that the protagonist was in great condition. Setsuna attributed it to the healing effect of the food they had made for him earlier. He explained it was nothing special. Smiling, he said he would be on the same team as Drago this time and could truly rely on him. Suddenly, someone called out to them. A blonde person introduced himself as Mifune, from the 3rd year. And the person next to him was Yuzuha. Both introduced themselves. With that, Mifune quickly gave Setsuna several compliments, suggesting they work together. Turning to Yuzuha, she commented that his friendliness seemed like an act to lower their guard. Smiling, he said it would only be for now. However, the training was about to begin, and the person in charge of the training was Giovanni. He explained they would be entering a 1-star dungeon. During the training, they were to defeat the monsters in combat. Their achievements would be recorded with a memory bracelet. The rewards from the monsters would count as bonus points, and the team with the most points would receive academy medals. The person with more than 100 points would have the opportunity to join the Magus Battalion Kingdom training. Hearing this, Setsuna felt a sense of nostalgia. They were the kingdom's strongest mages and his companions in his past life. If he joined the training, he might be able to meet them again. Giovanni explained they couldn't go to the deeper floors, as they might encounter monsters they couldn't handle. In an emergency, they could use the bracelet to return to safety. Looking at them, Setsuna declared his goal was to reach 100 points. But reconsidering, he said it would be 200, and Drago echoed the same. Drago remarked he was looking forward to seeing him achieve it. Giovanni asked if everyone was ready. With that, Setsuna and Drago began concentrating their magic, leaving everyone around them astonished by their energy. At that moment, the training finally began, and the two of them ran quickly. The 1-star dungeon was a ruin created by an ancient civilization. The monsters would be hostile to them, as they were seen as intruders. Despite having teleportation magic, it was still very dangerous. Drago pointed out to Setsuna that there was an open path. When they arrived, they were amazed, as they hadn't expected to find such a vast underground place. The protagonist noted the presence of ancient vegetation and wondered if a civilization had really existed within the ruins. He remembered the director saying that this training would be essential for future missions. Clenching his fists, he stated that his current goals were spirit magic and the training points, and he would do everything he could to achieve them. The rest of the group finally caught up with him. Yuzuha pointed out the multiple paths ahead. Another group questioned whether they were on the right path. Mifune called them idiots, explaining that the principle of training was to go deeper. He told them to follow that path. Thinking about what he had said, Setsuna had an idea. Walking up to the wall, he declared it was fake. Hearing this, everyone was surprised. Because of the vegetation, he suspected there was a large room behind it. Mifune asked if that wasn't just a coincidence. However, Setsuna explained he could hear the sound of wind coming from the other side, but before he could elaborate, Drago punched the wall. And by breaking the wall, Setsuna's theory was confirmed, and he said that path would be the right one. With that, they ran towards it, but behind them, Mifune intended to earn several points with this. As they walked down the corridor, a giant boulder fell on them. Drago asked them to leave it to him, and then he easily sliced the boulder with his blade. Setsuna said Drago had a strong spirit, which he acknowledged, as they needed people to recognize combat magic. However, even so, he didn't want to lose to him. Suddenly, several arrows flew toward him, but he dodged them. He advanced toward them, cutting them down. Seeing this, Drago realized they were on completely different levels. Then Drago asked them to clear the traps so it would be easier for Yuzuha and Mifune. But then, they found a chest, and at that moment, Mifune snatched it. He then thanked them for it. Seeing that, Drago was saddened at losing in terms of speed. And so, they continued after more points. But every time they tried to get the points, Mifune would steal them. Mifune soon mocked them, saying they would never be able to beat him. Though they were annoyed, there was nothing they could do. Watching them, Setsuna asked if stealing their points was their method. Looking at Mifune, Yuzuha asked if they were really saying that. Mifune explained he wasn't an idiot who just trained his muscles. He said humans were only used to achieve one's own pleasure, and if they were upset, they should do the same. Seeing this, Setsuna realized that man was quite cunning. He might be able to teleport since they had two different formation magics, but even so, there was still a problem. Yuzuha, however, didn't seem to care about her points, even though they had fought several monsters. This made Setsuna suspicious, as she probably had some hidden intention. While they walked, Mifune said there wasn't much left. At that moment, Setsuna noticed something. That room had something strange. Then Mifune quickly tried to open the chest, but an intense aura came out of that chest, and worried, Setsuna asked him to wait. Then, energy emerged from the chest and came toward them. That thing shouldn't be in a one-star dungeon. Seeing that creature, Setsuna realized it was on a completely different level. That monster was called the King of Death. The protagonist had heard of it before. Looking at them, the monster said that those who disturbed him should pay with their own lives. Seeing the monster speak surprised Drago. Setsuna asked him to grab Mifune and leave because it was too dangerous. However, upon seeing that, Drago asked how many points that monster would be worth. Then, the monster cast a spell and launched it at them, but Setsuna managed to disperse the magic. Meanwhile, Drago tried to advance on the monster, but failed and was thrown back by a strange magic. The monster then summoned several spells, surprising the protagonist. He realized that monster had intelligence and magic at a 4-star level. He managed to protect himself from the spells launched by the monster. But then, one spell was cast near Mifune, yet Drago managed to block it. Looking at the boy, Drago asked for his help. At that moment, another spell was launched at someone else. But Setsuna protected her and asked if she was okay, and she confirmed she was. Setsuna then asked Drago if they should do it. However, even in that situation, that ungrateful person still planned to steal their points and leave. Glancing back, Drago asked Mifune if he was planning something, but Mifune acted, saying he wouldn't do that to his saviors. Then they got ready. Meanwhile, Setsuna remembered that he couldn't finish Leo at that time because the charge hadn't been strong enough. In another moment, they were talking with Leano. They asked if there was a way to get stronger. He explained that there wasn't, but he knew something that could be useful. He then showed them a bracelet and explained it was fused with a magical weight. Using it would consequently increase their strength. However, he didn't recommend that Setsuna use it and asked them to be careful. Returning to the present, they began removing the bracelet, and when it made contact with the ground, it cracked the floor. That surprised Mifune to see that they were using something like that. But without giving them time, the monster once again launched magic at them, and so they used physical enhancement and charged toward it. Drago managed to land a solid kick to the monster's head, but in return, it managed to grab his leg. Then Setsuna appeared and kicked it far away, causing the monster to be destroyed. With that, the two earned 50 points as a reward. Mifune had never seen such strong combatants before. Looking back, Setsuna asked Yuzuha to show him her injuries, but she had disappeared, and the room began to crumble. Several monsters emerged from it, and seeing this, Setsuna wondered what was happening in that dungeon. The monsters kept rushing toward our heroes non-stop. No matter how many they killed, they didn't gain any points from them. He asked Setsuna if he had noticed that. However, Setsuna had already realized it. The monsters were being revived by dark powers. Drago said it never ended, and Mifune said this was abnormal for a 1-star dungeon. Seeing this, Setsuna recognized that feeling. The magic was coming from the lower floors. Then he asked if the others could also sense that magical power coming from below. But Mifune asked if it wasn't a mistake, and Setsuna explained he knew that magical power, and perhaps it could be Yuzuha's. However, Drago rushed ahead, saying they should go down first. Setsuna explained they had no choice, adding that Mifune would end up getting himself killed if he stayed alone. After all, he couldn't do anything but steal Drago's points. Then Setsuna went down after Drago, and having no other option, Mifune decided to go with them. Even in that situation, Mifune noticed they were very experienced and asked if they had trained before. However, Setsuna pointed to a spot, saying he felt a strong magic coming from that direction. Walking there, they realized that was the source of all that dark energy. It was a one-eyed monster, though it was his first time seeing such a monster. Normally the energy came from a magic circle. Mifune said those people didn't know how to explore a dungeon, but at that moment, Drago stretched a bit and struck Mifune, just giving him what he deserved for everything he had done. Nevertheless, the undead continued reviving, and they asked if anyone had noticed that the main source of magic had been destroyed. Despite that, he said they still had to earn points and finish the mission. Mifune was still frightened and just wanted to get his 100 points and leave the dungeon as soon as possible. Coming closer to him, Setsuna asked if he had noticed anything from Yuzuha. He explained he had no idea and said she had probably gotten scared and run away. However, Setsuna remembered that she didn't seem scared, Even when that monster attacked them, something strange was coming from her. And those monsters that shouldn't be in a 1-star dungeon, not to mention that it was supplying dark magic. Seeing all of this, he thought that one of the apostles might be involved. If that were the case, it would be dangerous for Drago and the others, and he prayed that Layla and everyone else were safe. The monsters then charged at them, and Drago only cared about earning points from them. With that, they began defeating all the monsters behind them. After defeating them all, Setsuna reached his goal of 200 points, and so did Drago. Mifune explained he would be leaving. Confused, Drago asked if he wouldn't look for Yuzuha. He explained that they had nothing in common. He had only met her yesterday, so he didn't care. However, when Setsuna was about to look for her, Mifune noticed they couldn't return to the surface. Desperate, he said that couldn't be true. Drago asked if something was wrong with the bracelet. Setsuna once again sensed the sinister power coming from below. He then said he would look for Yuzuha on his own, but Drago said he would go with him, as she had already done a lot for them. Setsuna didn't refuse the idea and asked him not to rush, as he still felt strong magic. Meanwhile, Mifune said they should get out and report everything to Professor Giovanni and asked why they were going after Yuzuha. Setsuna replied that he'd leave that to Mifune and asked him to be careful on the way back. Mifune wondered what was wrong with them, but despite that, it was still too dangerous for him to leave alone. However, Drago placed a hand on his shoulder and said they would find Yuzuha and leave together. With no other choice, Mifune said he would try to find her as well. As they walked, Mifune asked how Setsuna could sense Yuzuha's mana. He explained that it all came from practice, but that answer wasn't very convenient for him. At that moment, Drago noticed that the air around them had become colder, and suddenly, they heard a strange sound. Setsuna then pointed forward, claiming it was coming from that place. Drago walked ahead, asking if anyone was there. Then they found Yuzuha and immediately ran to her, asking if she was alright. However, something had happened. Her hand and face had been possessed by something, and frightened, Yuzuha asked them to save her. Drago tried to approach her, but Setsuna stopped him, because that was an ancient trap. Since there were no traces, it was probably imbued with dark magic, the same item his friend had obtained in his past life. Setsuna explained that this trap could be dispelled with a specific magic. He then asked the others to leave it to him. With that, Setsuna began concentrating his magic and then attacked the magic circle directly. Yuzuha then fell onto Setsuna, and he soon saw the magic that had been activated near her ear. Mifune asked what would happen to Yuzuha. After all, she had been irresponsible. Not even Setsuna knew, but he did know this accident was caused by one of the apostles, and he asked them to report it to the professors. Then Setsuna asked if Mifune could use his bracelet to get back. He tried, but as expected, it didn't work, and Yuzuha's wasn't working either. Drago then asked them to move forward, but suddenly, the entire place began to shake. Drago then told everyone to run. Mifune didn't understand anything that was happening, but the other told him to hurry up. However, Setsuna realized they were trapped. Since their path was filled with rubble, he suggested they look for another safe route. In another scene, Layla asked if anyone was there, and then she heard a voice asking for help. A person was trapped under the rubble, and they quickly went to save them. While healing him with her magic, they asked where the others were, and he replied that someone was behind the debris. Layla prayed that Setsuna and the others were safe. Drago suggested that Setsuna use his charged shot, but he explained that the risk was something that could cause another earthquake. But Drago said they would be fine if they removed the rubble. However, Setsuna explained that the air was getting hard to breathe and, besides, they were exhausted. Confused, he then asked if they had another way around this. Setsuna responded that they should go deeper, but given everyone's condition, he explained that he would do it alone. Mifune asked why he was so confident. Even though he was strong, there were still powerful monsters, and he suggested that Setsuna stay. But the protagonist explained that the boss had been awakened and, because of that, there had been multiple earthquakes, and they wouldn't be able to return. Drago found Setsuna's knowledge amazing, but all of it came from his exploration of other dungeons. Then Setsuna prepared to go, and Drago said to mark the path he took as a precaution. He explained that he would save everyone and then left. Meanwhile, Setsuna thought about the effect the boss had caused in that dungeon. It would be easier for him if he had an element or purification magic, and one of combat magic's weaknesses was the lack of elemental attributes, because most hand-to-hand combat magic attacks were direct. Even so, somehow, he felt something burning inside him. In another moment, Drago was trying to remove the rubble. Mifune then said he thought Setsuna winning the tournament had been luck, but he was wrong, and while he cheated, they were getting stronger. With that said, he wondered who the real idiot was. But suddenly, they heard someone asking if anyone was there. Drago quickly responded that they were there. Layla then realized it was Drago and asked how he was and also about Setsuna. He explained that everyone was there, and Setsuna had gone to look for another escape route. In another scene, Setsuna walked down the stairs and soon realized that the exit was right in front of him. However, it was blocked by a barrier. Furthermore, that place was filled with dark energy, and he couldn't let his guard down in that situation. Suddenly, something tried to attack him, but fortunately he managed to dodge and escape. Looking at the monster, he noticed it had 2 heads and that it was a hydra. He asked if it was the source of everything happening in the dungeon. Its body had been corrupted, as if resurrected by someone. The only one who could have done that was someone with the power of the evil god. Without giving him time, the hydra spread a wave of poison everywhere, and Setsuna avoided it. If the protagonist didn't defeat it, the dungeon's situation would worsen, so he had to finish it as quickly as possible. He then charged toward the hydra and struck it multiple times. The battle continued intensely. In his past life, he had fought a hydra before, so he knew that thing wouldn't die until its head was destroyed. So he would have to cut them one by one. But even so, his previous attacks caused no damage because of its thick skull. That's why he had to attack sensitive spots. With that, he managed to cut one head, and quickly dodged the attack from the other. He had been hit by the attack, but if he had been hit directly, that would have been his end. However, in an instant, the head regenerated, which surprised Setsuna. This made him realize he had to cut both heads at the same time. Sighing, he decided to test the move he had learned. In another scene, the protagonist tried to conjure 2 mana blades, but without success. Liano found it impressive, but explained that his body wasn't able to maintain the image in his mind. He explained that first he would have to control his mana from inside his body. Compared to other magic, this one required much more internal mana control. While recovering, he trained his mana control to improve it even more. However, despite this, he hadn't tested it since that day, so he started with 1 blade first, and after that, he would form the second. Setsuna prepared and struck the hydra, but without success, he still needed more strength. The hydra then threw him against the wall, but he used the wall as support for another attempt. He noticed he was using more mana than usual, and wondered if that was the effect of the poison. Soon he realized he couldn't endure more than this, but he couldn't die right there. He only had one chance, so he began breathing and focusing. The hydra tried to attack him, but he dodged, and then finally managed to conjure the 2 mana blades. He attacked it simultaneously with several cuts, chopping it into many pieces. Since he cut all the heads at once, that thing wouldn't revive anymore. Looking at his hand, he said his technique wasn't perfect, and that he had to train more to keep it stable. Someone appeared and congratulated him for defeating his creation, even without being a combat mage. He quickly realized it was Giovanni, and seeing Setsuna calm surprised him, but it was to be expected from him. Setsuna said this wasn't his first time, and he knew there would always be a chance for something unexpected to happen. Approaching him, Giovanni praised Setsuna's moves, but despite that, said he wouldn't survive on a battlefield. At that moment, Setsuna said he had 2 questions for him. First, he asked if he was an apostle, and second, the reason he was going so far with all that. He explained it was amazing to turn a dead body into a puppet, and after observing Setsuna's performance in the fights, that idea came to him. Just like the student Yuzuha, so Setsuna realized it was all part of his plan. Giovanni explained that she wanted to become his ally, and so he guided her, but he didn't expect anything from her in the end. Her getting close to him was annoying, and even after giving her that earring, she suspected nothing. But still, she should be happy to become an undead, even if she was an idiot. However, irritated, Setsuna said that was enough, and that he would make Giovanni pay for all his sins. Changing scenes, the others were removing debris, and Drago finally found Layla. She thanked everyone for their help, and said she didn't expect them to be trapped like that. However, the ground was no longer shaking and the red light was fading. That was probably caused by Setsuna. Mifune quickly said that the bracelet was working. Layla asked them to move farther away and teleport to a safe area. Then Drago asked everyone to be careful and, as a precaution, he would go after Setsuna. She understood and said she would wait outside. With that, Drago went in search of Setsuna, and then, returning to the previous moment, Giovanni provoked him, telling him to try to stop him. Setsuna quickly raised his fist toward him, but Giovanni turned into some sort of ice, and counterattacked him back. Seeing that, Giovanni asked how he would defeat him. Soon he realized that Giovanni's traps and counterattacks were fused. He had to put an end to this as quickly as possible, but his mana was exhausted from the previous fight. While running toward Giovanni, he noticed that before activating his magic, Giovanni needed to go somewhere to teleport. With that, he rushed forward and attacked him, but again was countered, and the poison was taking effect on his body. Fallen on the ground, Giovanni mocked him. However, Setsuna still refused to forgive him, and furthermore, he would definitely remove Yuzuha's curse. He explained that he didn't understand his motives, but making her undead was a reward for luring him in. If he wanted to break the curse, Giovanni had one condition, ordering him to swear loyalty to him. But Setsuna refused to be loyal to someone like him. Then he attacked again, but with no success, as expected. However, the protagonist managed to see where he would teleport, and quickly attacked. This surprised Giovanni that he learned so fast about his magic. While regenerating, this only made him want even more to add Setsuna to his undead collection. Setsuna realized that Giovanni was also undead. He stated that that person had granted him the power of immortality, thus making him his finest masterpiece. Setsuna asked if he was talking about the evil god. Then Giovanni explained that he only wanted to spread joy to everyone, granting immortality to those who were suitable. He then asked Setsuna to surrender to him. Setsuna's consciousness was fading, but he still needed to find a way around this situation. However, the protagonist sensed the person's mana and smiled, realizing that he was coming. Giovanni started his ritual. However, he was hit by a stone thrown by Drago. Not giving him time, Setsuna quickly rushed toward him and punched him, but Giovanni managed to turn into ice. Drago asked if he was alright. He explained that he was fine and could still fight, and asked about the others. Drago explained that they had already escaped the dungeon, and Layla and the others had saved them. Hearing this, Setsuna was happy, realizing that Layla was becoming more reliable. However, Giovanni became irritated upon seeing his ritual interrupted. He said that Drago was as inconvenient as always. Seeing this surprised Drago, and Setsuna explained that they had to stop his madness. Someone like him in their academy was unforgivable. Setsuna explained that Giovanni could counterattack them, so they had to dodge as quickly as possible, and when that happened, he would teleport elsewhere. The plan was to do this continuously until they finished him off, and his regeneration was already slowing down. Then they advanced on Giovanni, who found it all annoying, but Drago and Setsuna worked together, and managed to take down that man. Setsuna's hand was completely covered in blood and wounds, and Giovanni's body was destroyed as he lay on the ground. As Setsuna's body reached its limit, he collapsed. However, it was not yet the end for that man. He injected something that had been granted to him, and ordered the Hydra to fuse with him. With Setsuna's vision blurring, he asked Drago not to let his guard down. Seeing that, Drago was in shock, and Giovanni said he wouldn't forgive them for forcing him to use what that person had given him. In his Hydra form, he said he would tear everyone to pieces. At that point, both of them would be killed. However, Setsuna could do nothing about it. Setsuna then saw a flame in front of him, and wondered what it was. He then remembered that spirit magic enhanced one's body after merging with a spirit. He recalled the director asking him to feel and not use his head, to reach a state of emptiness. Setsuna managed to reach that state, and saw the presence of a spirit. Trying to reach it, he asked for its help to aid his friends. However, in an instant, he was taken to another dimension. Looking behind him, he saw a flaming being. He wondered if this could be one of the spirits the director had mentioned. Its mana was quite aggressive, and its body resembled a titan. Just being near it, he felt a crushing pressure. Despite this, he asked the spirit to listen to him. He asked it to grant him its power to protect his friends who were in danger. Seeing this, the spirit called him arrogant, and an intense flame began to swirl around the protagonist. He felt everything burning, despite the distance. The spirit then explained that it was only trying to quietly hear a human out, but even so, there would be no benefit in it. With that, it trapped him within several stones, and he asked why. It explained that it had no obligation to listen to his words. Then it began to burn him, saying it would make that place as hot as possible, just to melt him. With that, the protagonist began to be charred, but he did not give up. He had to persuade the spirit. Seeing the protagonist still conscious surprised it, for normally a human would already be dead. However, for some reason, it sensed the presence of the spirit of time in him, and asked if there was some reason behind it. It began to burn him even more, while Setsuna begged the spirit to listen to him. Watching him resist so much only irritated it further. It wasn't just him. It also included those people who had been sent to that place. All of them were annoying. Hearing this, Setsuna wondered if it knew about the evil god. Then he explained he would defeat it. But the spirit asked what he could do about that. Because no matter how hard he tried, that place was infinite, and it would make him burn with its flame. But Setsuna said he didn't care about that, and he would not waver again. Then the spirit smiled and told him to prove himself. It threw more flames at our protagonist, charring his skin. He could barely breathe from the heat. Even as his senses disappeared, he couldn't stop. Because of Drago and the real world, and after many thoughts, he realized he could not die until he defeated the evil god. Then he once again asked for the spirit's power so that he wouldn't lose to anyone, not even the evil god. The spirit was surprised, having never seen anyone last so long in that dimension. However, upon closer inspection, Setsuna had lost consciousness. So it granted him its power, and told him to leave that place quickly, and to finish off those annoying ones for it. Returning to the present, Drago was being cornered by Giovanni. He was unable to use mana against that type of ice. Seeing this, Giovanni asked if he was doing all of this just to save that human. But even so, it would be useless. Because of the previous attack, Drago was no longer able to do anything, and Giovanni said the next one would be his last. And after that, he would kill the person he had been protecting all this time. With that, he threw Drago away, and Drago only regretted not being able to use his mana anymore. Seeing Giovanni prepare his attack, he simply accepted his end. He then remembered his parents, who were proud of him, telling him to become the shield of his friends and show everyone the power of combat magic. However, he apologized to them for not being able to protect his friend. Then Giovanni finally launched his magic at him, but realized he had disappeared. Looking to his side, he wondered about that form. Setsuna was completely different from before, with an intense aura emanating from him. With that, Setsuna quickly vanished from Giovanni's field of vision. Then he suddenly appeared, preparing a punch and striking him right in the stomach. Sending him crashing into the wall, Giovanni wondered how he could use elemental magic. His regeneration was slower, and the flames coming from him were not normal. And seeing the symbol on his hand, he realized that he had two different magics in his body. Feeling that pressure from Setsuna made him tremble, and he wondered if by any chance he was afraid of him. He didn't want to believe it, so he began preparing another attack. Since he was undead, he wouldn't die, and so he launched his poison vortex at him. However, with just one hand, the protagonist managed to repel it. That surprised him, as he had evaporated his poison just with his mana. But without giving him time, the protagonist punched him, and Setsuna's body started to feel strange. He asked what was happening and if this was really occurring. The power granted to him seemed like he couldn't use it properly. Then Giovanni took advantage of that, attacking him from behind. However, even unconscious, he managed to dodge. Seeing this, Giovanni realized he had dodged purely on instinct. With that, Giovanni struck directly at Setsuna, preventing him from moving. Giovanni acknowledged his power, but even so, he was just a human. Advancing, he stated that he would take his head to prove that an undead is superior to a human. However, to everyone's relief, Layla appeared to help Setsuna. She apologized for taking so long and said she would no longer let him be hurt. Still, Giovanni didn't seem too impressed by her arrival. Looking at him, Layla noticed Setsuna was unconscious. Seeing that red hair and those flames, she wondered what had happened, but even so, she would protect him as much as she could. Suddenly, Setsuna was taken to another dimension again. The spirit called him pathetic for being consumed by just that level of flame, but Setsuna didn't understand anything since he thought they had already merged. However, Setsuna saw Layla and immediately asked what he should do to control his power, to which the spirit responded that he must find the answer himself. Seeing this, Setsuna showed concern. Layla continued fighting that monster, but was struck multiple times. Fallen, she remembered what Setsuna had said before. Setsuna had stated that he could become stronger after resolving his heart. He soon remembered someone telling him not to rush, because once his heart was resolved, he would definitely become stronger. Seeing that, the spirit clamored for more entertainment, and asked if he would meet his end along with that woman. If that were the case, the spirit would be the one to finish him off. Then something stirred inside Setsuna. Returning to the present, Giovanni was surprised to see Setsuna. But without giving him time, Setsuna quickly grabbed him and used his elemental magic. Inferno Blaze. Setsuna explained that humans have limited lifespans, so they have no choice but to give their all. And it was precisely because he had been on the brink of death that he could understand the magic of fire spirits. With that, he charged Giovanni. Meanwhile, Layla asked if he was alright. Seeing her, Setsuna smiled, saying things would be better. He thanked her for protecting him and asked about her injuries, which she said were fine. Drago said he didn't expect to see Layla in that place. She explained that the seniors had already escaped using teleportation magic, but she had a hunch and decided to come there. Layla asked the others to explain the situation to the professors, so she was sure they would appear soon. He was glad to hear that, but since his body was exhausted, he ended up passing out. Then the rest of the group arrived, seeing 3 fallen students. Their rescuers felt relieved to see everyone was safe. They had heard the situation from Mifune, so they were there to help, but Setsuna asked them to take care of Layla and Drago first. Watching them leave, he felt relieved. At another moment, as he opened his eyes, he realized he was back in the infirmary. Looking around, he remembered everything that had happened. Even after all that, he could still feel his body warm from the fight. Suddenly, someone opened the door. It was Lionel. Setsuna asked about the others, so Lionel said he always worried about them first, even while in a coma. He explained that the others were already fine, and he was the last to wake up. Lionel had heard all about that fight. He explained that the incidents were being resolved by the director's orders, which relieved Setsuna, but there were still many unknowns. However, despite being late, Lionel apologized to him. He stated that he had heard about the Leofere Elmcrest incident from the director. There were still people more powerful like him, but when they tried to investigate, it was delayed due to the recent incident. They couldn't perceive Giovanni's intentions and put the students in danger once again. He then said he wouldn't let an incident like this happen again, which Setsuna understood and asked him to raise his head. But he felt another pain in his body. Lionel explained that these were the effects of surpassing his mana limit. Since his injuries were already healed, he shouldn't worry, all thanks to the person who treated him. He asked who that person might be. Then they heard a knock on the door, and Lionel said that the person was right there. The person in question was Professor Zachary, which surprised Setsuna and us as well. He gave him some sliced apples and asked him to eat. However, Lionel patted him on the back and said that he wanted to tell him something. Zachary also apologized for treating him poorly during the orientation test. However, seeing a person like him joining that department irritated him. In the past, he had been an honor student, but after discovering that his path would be combat magic, all his friends and family abandoned him. And upon hearing that someone like Setsuna would choose combat magic, it made him angry. But even so, his team got the highest points in the training, and moreover, it was a record. Despite that, he was happy that Setsuna proved that melee combat mages could be capable of something like that, and he thanked him. Setsuna found him strange, as he seemed like a different person, and wondered if that was caused by his first impression. Then he smiled and also apologized for being rude, and he thanked him for saving them, and then Zachary left, saying he would see him in class. After he left, Lionel handed him something, saying that the director wanted to give it to him. It was a glove, since he couldn't use bandages to hide that thing. No one had ever heard of the symbol on his hand before. Hearing this, Setsuna asked if Lionel had ever heard of spirit magic. He explained that the other name for spirit magic was ancient magic. That magic triggered a great magical war between mages hundreds of years ago, and therefore anything related to it was forbidden. So he asked Setsuna not to use that magic in front of others, because if the Holy Church knew about him, it would be all over. Thinking about it, he remembered having learned this, but he never expected that that magic was specifically spirit magic. This confused him, and he asked how Lionel knew about it. Lionel stated that the director had explained everything, the evil god, the apostles, and spirit magic, and also about him having returned from the future. Only he and the director knew about it. Setsuna understood the situation and was relieved to know that only they knew about it, but wondered if that was really the best option. However, Lionel explained that he didn't care about what happened to him, because now he was just Setsuna Cromwell of the Melee Combat Magic Department, and then Setsuna thanked him. However, he asked where the director was, and Lionel explained that he had found some clues about the apostles, so he would be absent for a while. Hearing this surprised him, but Lionel asked him just to rest for now, and when he recovered, he would tell him something. This only made him question everything. During that fight, he remembered that if it weren't for that power, he would have been in much worse shape. Even though he managed to control that power thanks to Layla, he still didn't feel confident he could do it again. That power was something tremendous and strong. Suddenly, he heard a voice in his head affirming everything he said. After all, a mere human like him wouldn't be able to control its power easily. He looked to the side, but there was no one there, which the spirit stated that it was right in front of him, and by covering his body, it explained that it had manifested. Seeing it in that form, he asked if it really was a spirit. It introduced itself as Blazer, but for Setsuna, that form didn't suit it. However, Blazer jumped off his bed and went toward the window, surprised to see the modernity of human society, because everything was huge, though it was only huge because he was small. Setsuna asked if there was anything special, to which he replied no, but at least it was a new sight, despite being his first time in that form. He then asked the reason for that form. Blazer then asked if he knew they were connected by the symbol, and he confirmed it. Then he replied that he needed a certain amount of mana. However, if he assumed that form, the mana of a mortal would run out in no time. Because of that, he would only be able to use that form for now. Realizing this was his only chance to ask something related to the spirits, he then asked about the great magical war that took place hundreds of years ago, wanting to know if he was involved and the outcome of the war. However, Blazer didn't know. He didn't remember many details, stating that he only felt furious. But he was no longer interested in his past. What he really cared about was the present. With that, he started running, while Setsuna asked him to wait. Setsuna couldn't let others know about the existence of a spirit, and so he started running after him. As Blazer ran through that place, he said they were worthy of his exploration. People around wondered what it was, and the girls thought the creature was cute. Setsuna ran after him, but Blazer asked why his body was so weak. Then he mocked him, asking if he would be able to contain him. Even though Setsuna's body wasn't in good condition, he chased after Blazer. Suddenly, a blonde man tried to confront him, but Setsuna ignored him. Ahead, there was another person, but Setsuna also ignored them. Reaching another room, he realized he had lost sight of him. Mifune then asked what had happened to him. The girls next to Mifune mocked Setsuna, but that only irritated Mifune, who told them not to speak that way about his friend. He apologized for Setsuna and explained that the atmosphere had become like this after he got a high score in the training. Setsuna said he didn't expect to be treated like that by someone like him. And then Setsuna found his personality quite unique, but Mifune mentioned Yuzuha. Her life wasn't in danger, but she was still imprisoned and being interrogated by the teachers. This obviously changed Setsuna's expression, but he asked Mifune if he had seen a red creature, which he confirmed he had seen ahead. Looking out the window, he saw Blazer, thanked him, and went after him. Others began to gather around him. Then the purple-haired man asked if that was a magical beast. Above, he saw Setsuna shouting at him. But seeing Setsuna, he got irritated because he had messed things up for him. Yet, upon seeing that beast, he smiled. He began to cast a spell intending to hit that beast, using the excuse that he had to maintain order in the academy. However, when he launched the spell, Blazer dispersed it with his flames. This surprised him, and Blazer then asked if that person intended to attack him. So he unleashed a wave of flames at him, telling him to know his place. With that, he burned his clothes, making him flee. Setsuna, meanwhile, was relieved to see that Blazer was okay. However, the students were in danger since he could use his powers in that form. The onlookers asked if that had been a flame. Blazer told them it was nothing and asked if they were friends of that idiot. With no choice, the others suggested it would be better to leave. But at that same moment, Layla appeared. This worried Setsuna, but his legs started hurting again. Layla, meanwhile, observed him, and Blazer asked if she wanted to be burned by his flames. He shouted to Layla, but his leg was still bothering him. She then approached Blazer and asked if he was the one who helped Setsuna in the dungeon. Then she thanked him for saving her friend's life. Hearing this, Blazer was pleased to know that at least she had a decent attitude. Seeing this, Setsuna was surprised. Layla then offered him one of the apples she would give Setsuna when she visited him. Blazer thanked her for the gift and, upon biting the apple, found the taste very good. At another time, everyone was having lunch, and Drago asked what that creature was. He replied that it was a magical beast, as he shouldn't reveal its true identity. Even though he had to be vigilant about this, Blazer posed no threat to the students. Setsuna thanked Layla, and she said it was nothing. After all, he seemed just nervous with so many people around him. Other students passing by were surprised to see an animal like that. While eating, Blazer noticed that his existence drew attention, but since it was just gossip, he wouldn't do anything. He then realized that Blazer was being treated like a rare animal. Blazer then told Layla that he could make her his subordinate, but no one besides Setsuna could hear him. Then the protagonist called the two of them, thanking them once again for having saved him in the dungeon. She explained that saving a friend was simply the right thing to do. Suddenly, Drago said that he brought something with him, showing a letter he had received from his relatives. They were happy and sent him a letter, allowing him to be proud of being a combat mage. Setsuna was then happy to hear that from his friend. Layla then called out to Setsuna, asking about Professor Giovanni's true identity. But not even Setsuna knew, though maybe they could learn something after interrogating Yuzuha. At first glance, he thought that Giovanni was also an apostle, despite his only ability being to merge with a hydra. But even so, he had a lot of power. Changing the subject, Drago also had a question for him and asked about the power he used in the dungeon. He suspected something about his flames. Layla then explained to him that it was because of that creature that gave him that power. Meanwhile, Layla stroked Blazer as if he were completely tamed. Setsuna explained that he was in a state of emptiness, so he kind of didn't know how to explain it, but suddenly he was called. It was Professor Silas, the long-range magic teacher. The other students wondered if he would scold another student again. Irritated, he sent them away, and soon asked about that animal. Because he had never seen a magical beast before, he asked if it wasn't banned. Then he told Setsuna that he would first have to register that pet at the academy. But being called a pet by him ended up irritating Blazer. He then asked Setsuna to do something about it before he ended up taking that animal away. Blazer then asked if he was crazy for saying those things to him. However, someone appeared and tried to help Setsuna, but that left the protagonist surprised to see him doing that. Smiling, Silas said that it was quite shameful of him to bow his head to a student, especially one who used to have the highest honor in combat magic. However, upon hearing that, Drago got angry and banged on the tables. Then Silas asked what he wanted. Drago quickly went to Zachary and grabbed him, saying that everything was thanks to him. The reason they got first place in that training was because of Professor Zachary. After a brief glance between Setsuna and Layla, they quickly caught on to Drago's trick and started praising and thanking Professor Zachary, who almost cried with joy. However, that only irritated Silas. Another student in the back made fun of him for acting as if he were superior and powerful, even though the combat department had a higher rank than long range. This made him run away, saying that Setsuna should hand in the documents the next morning. He then sighed in relief, as he didn't know what to do if Blazer got angry. Setsuna thanked Zachary for his help. Then he said he understood that Setsuna had a reason for bringing a magical beast. In another scene, Layla and the others said their goodbyes to them. When he left, he noticed a phantom beast that delivered a letter to him. The letter said that it had heard about his situation, and apparently he managed to obtain spirit magic and congratulated him. That letter was written by the director. He explained that he was worried that Setsuna wouldn't be able to control it due to still recovering. Even though he wanted to teach him better, he still had to be away. Because of that, he asked a certain individual to teach him, which surprised him, because she would teach him how to use his magic and how to control it. The director explained that Liano would introduce him personally and wished him luck. In another scene, an old person was sitting while reading the letter left by the director. He found it pathetic to have to teach someone how to use spirit magic, and furthermore, the director had exposed that place without his permission. Even if it was his recommendation, he wouldn't forgive him. Throwing the letter, he stated that he would finish off Setsuna Cromwell if he were incompetent. During a magical conference, the director explained that this was his report. The man next to him asked if he thought this would be the end of it. They found it hard to believe in the evil god and his apostles. After all, he still had no evidence about it. But the director explained that their enemy hadn't left any traces, and that's why he came there looking for some assistance. That other fellow thought it was all nonsense, and said that maybe he had some memory problem. Upon leaving, Lionel called out to the director, who immediately explained that it had been a tumultuous meeting. It's understandable that they wouldn't believe him, and Lionel agreed, saying it's not something that can be discussed so easily. However, despite that, this fact couldn't be ignored. Nevertheless, if the apostles make their move, he had a proposal to make. He then sat down and asked about Setsuna's situation. Lionel answered that he was recovering and doing his best. Smiling, he realized that his student was an odd one, and he asked for him to recover and find that person. Meanwhile, Carol was watching Setsuna, but when he opened his eyes and saw her, he got startled. He asked why she was there, and she replied that she heard he wasn't doing well. Because of that, she decided to come and bring some food for his recovery. She said the recipe was taught to her by Drago. Setsuna thanked her for looking for Blazer yesterday on his behalf. Carol said that she and Layla were together, and bought some food to feed him. Her voice was very cute, like a meow, but Setsuna found it all hilarious. Crossing her fingers, she said that Layla was amazing because she took care of Blazer. She did it as if it were natural, but even so, it's important to treat someone kindly without causing harm. Since she was always with her phantom beasts, she understood that, and it made her happy. Setsuna smiled because that was so Layla's style. However, he realized he couldn't stay like this forever. As soon as his body recovered, he would go after the teachings of spirit magic. Carol then said she would head back to class, bid him farewell, and asked him to return with Blazer. After finishing his meal, he opened a book, looking to gain as much information as possible about spirit magic, the great event of the Great War 200 years ago, and its followers who tried to control other mages. Two sides fought across the continent, and although ancient magic was vast, only a few could use it. The result of the battle was that the mages were victorious. When an ancient magic mage is spotted, he becomes a target, because even his knowledge is dangerous, and for that reason, he had to keep Blazer a secret. A magic he didn't even know in his past life. If he could control it, he'd be able to defeat the evil god. However, the incident where Leo appeared and Giovanni as well, either happened in his past life. He wondered if changing the course of history was the right thing to do. After a few days, they met again. Carol was worried about Setsuna and asked if he really would go to the training right after recovering. He confirmed, since it was the academy's holiday. Showing his fists, Drago stated that he wouldn't lose to him. Layla petted Blazer, noticing he would feel lonely. Then Setsuna thanked everyone for their help and said he would leave, and they all asked him to take care until then. Lionel was pleased to see that he had made great friends. At that moment, the only problem for him was about Blazer. Even though he was worried, he couldn't leave everything to Layla every time. Later on, Lionel explained that they would ride those transport lizards. However, it was difficult to tame them, despite being the best choice for a long journey. The old man explained that the lizards tended to be fast, so he wouldn't be responsible if they got hurt. With that said, the protagonist didn't mind. After all, it all depended on how he handled them. He slowly grabbed it by the strap and jumped onto its back. This surprised the man, since normally people have difficulties, and so they finally began the journey. And meanwhile, Blazer was with Setsuna. Seeing Lionel, he asked if he was feeling well, which he answered he was not used to it. Further ahead, they encountered some people and quickly stopped. Those people didn't look like bandits, but they raised their weapons. Lionel then asked if they were those people. They confirmed, saying they were servants of the witch Morgana. Setsuna realized that name had been written in the letter he received from the director. Then Lionel explained that they were on their way to meet their master and asked if they were there to get them. However, With a cold expression, the girl stated she had no intention of meeting a combat mage. This surprised Setsuna, for the voice sounded completely different, and Lionel asked if it was Morgana. Getting ready, Lionel stated that those things were not human, and he explained that they were dolls created through alchemy. The girl realized that he was Setsuna Cromwell, the one chosen by a spirit by accident, and then she asked him to prove himself by defeating those girls, thus unleashing a wave of energy at them. Setsuna then began to fight, dodging the attacks coming his way, and Lionel did the same. For a doll to be that strong meant that its master was powerful. The girl stated that they were not worthy of being taught about spirit magic. Looking at them, he responded that they were underestimating him, and since that was the case, he would get serious. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.